this week we're going to talk about self-help books, the recent ones I've read that have been great, that have been not so great, and kind of what goes wrong with the genre. Welcome to Essential Enthusiasm, episode 19, with me, Tara Swiger, and Jolie Kelly of joliecreates.com.
Hello.
Hello. Today, we kind of go back and forth about the books that we are each reading. And this week, I wanted to talk about two books that I had read recently. The first is Girl, Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollins, I think. We'll link it up in the show notes. There will be her right name and a link to Amazon. Hollis, that's it. I know I remembered. And then the second book I read was I'm Judging You, the Do Better Manual by Lovey Ajayi. And you might know Lovey because she has a website, Awesomely Lovey. Have you ever read it, Jolie?
No.
Okay. I follow her on social media. She's hilarious. She is a Nigerian-born, American-raised Black woman who is such an amazing writer. And so these two books I read back to back. At first I was like, oh, this week we'll talk about Girl, Wash Your Face. Except for that, the more I thought about it, Girl, Wash Your Face she tells her story kind of in like 21 lies that she's believed over the course of her life. So each chapter is a lie that like she realized was a lie. So like, you need a man to complete you, or your worthiness is tied to your weight and your body and what you look at, or stuff about work, like your worth as a human being, and about work and about doing your own thing. And she runs a website, I think it's called The Chic, or like chicsite.com. And I didn't realize when I started reading the book, but once I started reading it, because I got it from my library's the Libby program we talked about in a past episode. Mm-hmm. So it just like got downloaded to my Kindle. I didn't realize it was published by a Christian publisher. And so her book was not overtly religious in any way, but regularly referenced, like, I think her site is for like for Christian women, and it regularly referenced like Bible verses or God's plan for her life, that kind of thing. And the book, like, her lessons were good, and like I highlighted bits and I was like, yes, like she said things that you and I talk about when it comes to mindset and taking care of yourself and valuing yourself. And I know you were recently reading a book about valuing yourself. Mm-hmm. That we'll probably talk about next week. Yeah. She says things that are right, but I realized the book, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago with things you didn't like in books, where like they're saying the same thing you've heard a lot of times.
Yeah.
And maybe the audience, and this is what I think about every book, is the audience who's going to read this book because of who it is has not heard these things before.
Yes.
And so like, maybe this is good and it's said in a way that they can hear, which I am like all about if they are like, if it's helpful and somebody hears this message of like, your body weight does not determine your self-worth, you are capable, you do not need a man to complete you, which seems like a giant duh. Also, one of her lies was like, I'm a bad mother, and like all the ways that she had compared herself to other mothers. And then like a lot of it comes down to comparing yourself to other people.
Right.
And I was like, yes, I would recommend this book for someone who had literally never thought about these things.
Yeah. It sounds like she had like an ideal audience that maybe you fell like outside of. So it's not like, it's like when I talk to people, I'm like, well, my right person, like my super right person is X, Y, and Z. And I have a lot of people who follow me who are not X, Y, and Z, and they still like get benefits from my stuff. But like, it doesn't have that, oh my God, she's in my head, like talking to me, she understands me completely type of vibe.
Totally. And it made me think that like a lot of the things, I don't know if you feel like this, but a lot of the things that I read that like Amazon or my library will recommend for me because of other things I've read are basically the same messages over and over. And sometimes I'll need that, like when I'm going through a hard time, or like, because I will tend to read like a nonfiction book in the morning with my coffee. And so like something that's encouraging and uplifting and like, you can do this is like what I need to read. But a lot of times I'm like, could you just say it in a slightly different way? Like, could you just like bring something new to the table?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Sometimes I do need to hear the same thing over and over and over again. But sometimes you are just like, okay, like this wasn't what I wanted. Like, I'm still looking for, like, the missing piece, and, like, you're just giving me all the same pieces. Like, I've done this jigsaw before.
Exactly. And I think part of it is because, like, I put together my book proposal about a book that's about trusting yourself in order to build a business that you like. So when I see those same messages, I'm like, I can list 30 books that those messages are in because that's part of the process of writing a book proposal is you like look at the other books that have a slightly similar message. And so I'm like, yeah, so if you've read a bunch of those books, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But if you are needing that, like sometimes I'll just get books from the library that I know are going to be repetitive, but they're like, I need something in the morning that will fill this niche. So I'm going to read this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then the Lovey book, the I'm Judging You, is amazing because it purports to be about the same topics, but comes at it in a different way that's new. And so her framing is like, she's giving you side eye. And like the cover of the book, I wish I had it from my library, but it's like one of those red popsicles, or not popsicles, but like suckers that little kids get. And it's giving you, it's like the side eye emoji is printed on it,
Yeah.
which I love. And she's like, the intro is like, she's giving you side eye for all the ways that like, you should know better. You're a human grown adult. You should know better. And it's fantastic because it's like, so the first part is like relationships. So like there are crappy ways to be a friend. There are like crappy ways to like be with your bae, your boyfriend or partner. Like there are both ways that you can be crappy, and there's ways that you can accept crappiness into your life when you deserve better. And so she talks about that. And then there's a section on like society. And what I like is I feel like so many of the self-help books talk just about your own belief in yourself. And like, oh, so she has one of the chapters, which is on yourself for relationships, is also like hygiene, like get a shower, wash your bras. And this is like classic take care of yourself advice, but like a lot of times people don't put it in books. But part of my problem with self-help books is a lot of times they talk about like you believing in yourself, but they're like, the world needs more people to believe in themselves, and you'll go do amazing things in the world. But that doesn't like talk about the issues that are facing us in the world that like you could have a hand in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So she talks about misogyny and racism in like catcalling and like basically ways that we put up with stuff that we don't need to put up with, like that we don't need to accept into our lives as acceptable. And I was like, preach through the whole thing. Like it's so great because if you're going to take the premise that like this book is going to improve yourself, so like what are you going to do with that improved self and that improved sense of self-worth?
I love that.
Isn't that great? And then she has a whole section on social media, which is like basically the ways that you could be crappy on social media and you shouldn't. And I'm saying this like saying judgy makes it sound very judgy, like you're doing wrong. It's not really you're doing wrong. It's like maybe you don't know better. Like a lot of her tone is like, maybe no one told you, but this is unacceptable. And if you want me to stop judging you, like here's what you need to do to get your act together. And I think that there's so much like, you're a star and you're full of light and you're perfect. But like some of us weren't taught some of these things that like, and this is actually, I saw an Instagram story that she talked about why she decided to write the book is because someone plagiarized a whole one of her blog posts. Like she's been blogging since Zanga blog. So she's been like on the internet forever. I think she's like 2005, 2006.
Right.
Somebody took one of her whole blog posts and put it on his blog and did use no quotes, no link, no attribution. And all these people were tweeting her like, this looks like you're writing. And she's like, oh, that's my exact blog post. And he apologized and took it down. And she's like, I thought, did no one teach you better? Like, we need a manual we can hand people to be like, you should be better. And so that's what she wrote. And and she says in the beginning, like, maybe your mom didn't teach you that you should be doing this, but this is what you should be doing. And so it's like that, it's that point of view. So not judgy, like, I'm coming down hard on you because you suck, but more like, come on, step it up.
Right. So did you read it and feel like you were doing some of the things she said, or was it like, oh yeah, I'm super annoyed by all those things too?
That's a really good point. It was like it was like, I'm super annoyed by all the things she said, especially about like uh, things on social media, like haters on social media, which you and I don't get a lot of, but you see other people like pile on, and the whole like Gamergate issue, and when people are doxxed, and like just the like massive ways it can go wrong. I'm like, yeah, that's horrible. But then there's also things that I was like, yeah, like what is all this self-worth going towards if not helping other people and the world at large about some of the biggest issues that we've got going on in our world. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I think what I like about it, and why it's like deeper than just like don't do this, is it's like here's how, like almost here's how to talk about this. So the big issue that like I don't know how to talk about is racism and systematic racism. And I can acknowledge that it's there, and I can acknowledge white privilege, but like what? And so like I don't know the next step. So she like gives next steps. She talks about how to talk about it. So she talks about like for men, like it doesn't matter that you think you're complimenting a woman. If you're commenting on her body, that's unacceptable. Mm-hmm. So it's like that kind of like, let me break it down like real small so that you know like what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And yeah, so a lot of it was just practical too, like just practical of like, okay, yeah, I should do that. I mean, obviously not the part about like getting showers, but like even the being a good friend, like when your friend says this, if you immediately jump in with with your own stories of what's going wrong in your life, maybe you're not giving her empathy, and what she needs is like you to just listen, stuff like that.
Yeah. So the rebel in me is a little bit like, but why should I listen to her? Like, so, like, I mean, it sounds like everything she's saying, like, I agree with it, it's common sense, but, like, there's the little part of the rebel in me is like, okay, that's all great advice, but, like, maybe she's wrong about how to be a good friend. And, like, she's probably not, though, right? Like,
right. I mean, she's not very, pushy about the good friend stuff. It's more like, hey, if you're always doing it this way, like, is that what your friend is looking for?
Yeah.
Like, almost like check yourself.
Yes.
Like you're making a lot of assumptions about how to live in the world, and maybe you could check those assumptions, you know, like, and so it's less, I know it sounds so, the title makes it sound preachy, like that I'm judging you, I'm giving you side eye, but it's more like, check that you're being the kind of person you want to be.
Yeah.
And so much of what, and this kind of goes into what we were saying the other week about like, wanting kids to read more because it gives them more perspectives into different people's worlds, is like so much of your life is on autopilot, and it seems normal because it's your normal, and maybe it's not. Like maybe your parents and your family like, and your normal isn't, I don't want to say appropriate, but like beneficial.
Yeah.
You know? And like maybe it's not beneficial to you and what you want to get out of your life, but it's also not beneficial to the people in your life.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it also makes me think like, so reading different authors with different points of view, it's also like visiting new places or like going in other people's homes. And I'm always like, oh my gosh, people live like this and this is their normal. Whatever it is. Like maybe it's like really super perfectly clean, everything in its right place. And I'm like, people live with like their life constantly picked up. How do they live like that? And other houses are the opposite. And I'm like, how do they wade through all of this stuff? And this is their normal. So I think reading books and even like self-help books, this is what I like about books that are like self-help, is it gives you the opportunity to be like, am I just accepting as normal something that's not helping me?
Yes. And I like also like, first of all, that's written by a woman, and secondly, that's written by a woman of color, because I am trying to get out of the habit, or not even habit, just like default of reading a lot of self-help books by, like we said before, like just white men. Like why?
Right.
I need just to have different points of view and different,
right.
It just expand who I'm letting influence my life, and not always being influenced by like this one very small box.
Exactly. That was another reason I picked it up. And also because I realized that like, so I think I read a lot of self-helpy kind of stuff by white women. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain privilege that underlies, like a way that you're allowed to operate in the world. That's what I mean by privilege. And especially in America and probably in the UK too. And there's also like an assumption of that privilege in their writing. And I know that that must be true of my own work as well. And so by breaking out of that, of just reading that kind of material, I'm hoping it also helps me not put that in my own work, not like bake in that certain level of assumptions about the people who are listening to my work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something I've been thinking about.
Yeah. So that's why I like reading the different books by the different people and the different kinds of authors. And then also the other thing is it changes it up, right? Like if you want your morning reading to be encouraging, to hear it from a different perspective, it's like just highlighting things in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And there's also like a real, I don't know, like opportunity bias, right? Like there's, a real issue of like if you only read the same stuff, like you're just getting like what you already believe reconfirmed to you. And like sometimes you need to read things that even like that you might disagree with just to like use your brain and like engage in some discussion and making sure like you're not just kind of getting the same thoughts told to you over and over again.
Exactly. Yes, totally. Confirmation bias. Like we all look for information that confirms what we already think we know. And that just like really narrows your world, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is something I've been kind of like working through or nudging my husband towards. Like he started reading more science fiction books by women. And like he came home from the library, he's like, they don't have a lot of science fiction books written by women. I was like, yeah, like welcome to our world. And he went to a conference about internet security stuff. And like he sent me a text. He's like, I never noticed it, but there's not a lot of women here. And I was like once he started, I was like, this is what I go, like part of me is frustrated because I'm like, this is my experience every time I go to like a YouTube thing and like there's a panel full of men and like, but then part of me is like happy, like at least he's starting to open his eyes and like, yes, like look around the room that you're in. If they all look like you, right? It's not a great room. So he's
no. And like just recognizing that means that he can help recognize that like maybe they're going to be uncomfortable in a way that he could help with, right? So like if like almost everybody in the room looks like you, then acknowledging like, wow, there's someone who's here who doesn't look like anybody else, they might be uncomfortable. I'm going to make sure and include them.
Yeah.
So if they're like, we're all standing around talking, like invite them into the conversation, like make sure that this space is safe for them in a way that like people aren't telling sexist jokes or people aren't like commenting about women's bodies. I can't tell you how many places I've been because I used to work with, this is going to sound horrible, but I used to work in continuing medical education, which means there's like a lot of doctors who are going back to get their CME credits, taking like workshops and stuff. And my department helped organize it. And so a lot of doctors would be standing around commenting on boobs. It's like, just like, I'm sitting here, I'm the only woman because they're all male, doctors. And they're like, not even thinking that would make me feel really unsafe. And if I was a female physician and I was there for work and I was their colleague, like, right? How safe does she feel? How much does she feel like she can get involved and learn and get the same networking benefit they're all getting out of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes. So noticing is the first step. Like as frustrating it is that he's just now noticing at like 30 something, you can also be like, well, but like now he can make a tiny difference just by recognizing like, oh, that person might be uncomfortable.
Oh yeah. No, it's definitely a good thing. Like you can't, like I can choose to be frustrated or I can choose to be like, yay, you're starting to open your eyes and seeing that like, yes, as a woman, things are not always the same as they are for men and our experiences can be very different when we walk into a room. Particularly in technology fields and the gamer communities and stuff are still like super unfriendly and it's really frustrating.
Definitely. Yeah. So read this book if you want to like read about some chapters about like how to talk about it and how to interact and think about both the gender issue and the race issue of like what do I even say or do? Like, what's appropriate? Yeah. And so I was definitely going to have Jay read it too. She gives a really great, so like just a little aside, she gives a really great explanation about why catcalling is like not a compliment. And it's all like, the foundation is like commenting on anybody's body is like not something that it's just your right to do. And I was like, oh, if we could shift this in society, like just the underlying belief. And I mean, it starts with people like your sons, right? The underlying belief that they do not have a right to comment on anyone's body, even if it's a compliment, like that is outside of like what is their right to do in the world. And I was like, she just explained it in such a way that I was like, yes, that's what I've been looking for. So I enjoyed it.
Good. No, I like that because we are having, I mean, my kids are young, so right, like they're not commenting on anyone's like sexual attributes, but my youngest, loves to comment about people's weight. And like, I think I even once got really frustrated. I told him to stop fat shaming me, and he just looked at me. But he will just like regularly go up to people and be like, "Why's your belly so big?" And just like, you need to stop. Like, it's not appropriate to comment on people's bodies, and it doesn't matter. Like, I'm beautiful with my belly big or not. But he's so. Right. So I think like even when you have like young kids, like conversations about commenting on people's appearance can start like really early.
Well, they give you a lot of opportunity to figure out like what is my issue that they're bringing up right now, right? So like if he's fat shaming you, he just wants to comment on things, and it's like they're really great at being like, oh, you're uncomfortable about this, so I'm gonna keep poking it because you're uncomfortable.
I think he's just trying to figure out how like a body, like, because all of his kids' friends are just normal. I think he's trying to figure out like how you go from like looking like a kid with a slim body to like having a round belly and curves. Like he's trying to like, doesn't really understand.
Yeah, which is kind of great. Like, because how old is
he? 6.
Yeah. No, it was like around that age that I realized like being fat was bad. And like, yeah, because 7 is when I made my really thin friend who would tell me all the time that I was big, and she was very thin, and she'd be like, let's compare our wrists and let's compare our knees. And she was very like, she's like a bird. Like now she's like 5'2" and maybe 100 pounds, and like I'm 5'7" and not 100 pounds. And so like we were never gonna be same size, but at like 7, I was super, and I like, that'd be great if your boys don't like make it apply to themselves, right? Like big or little, bad or good, that's all stories.
It is. It's like, so hard. And like Leo is very skinny. He's just growing really tall. But he uses that word like, oh, I'm really skinny. And I'm like, where are you picking up this word? But people must comment on it like at school or when they're getting changed at PE. And I'm just like trying really hard not to put like negative connotations or positive connotations on this label of skinny. But yeah, that's something that we can talk about in a future episode. If anyone has recommendations for books about body positivity and like accepting your body, like I'd love to hear your recommendations. Also, if you have recommendations about women and anger, I'm still looking for books on that. But yeah, I came to the realization the other day, like I've hated my body since puberty, and it kind of like hit me at how long puberty like was. Like it's like over half my life, like I've been told that my body doesn't fit into what's pretty or beautiful or attractive. I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like I got really angry about all those stories society tells us about our bodies and how young they start for women.
Yes.
Especially.
Yes.
I mean, boys too.
Yes. Yes, totally. I would love to talk about and read a book about that, just because I think that a lot of our audience probably knows that those are like cultural stories we've been told for a long time, but maybe just to hear that like you don't have to buy into them, but learning to buy out of them is like a really long process.
Yeah.
Like, because I kind of thought 5 or 6 years ago, like, okay, I'm all done with this. Like, I recognize the messages the patriarchy's been giving me. I like see them when I see them. I see them for what they are, which is just a marketing message, and I reject them. So I just thought like I was good. But like No, because I still judge myself harshly based on these marketing messages. So like, yeah, I'd be happy. So Michelle says in the comments that she just read This Is Me by Chrissy Metz, who's the actress who's on This Is Us.
Oh,
Have you seen
right.
that? Yeah. So she said loved it and keep wanting to recommend it to you. Excellent.
Oh, awesome. I will write that down. Otherwise I'll forget.
Yes, we will definitely look at it. And so for you, our listeners, if you have book recommendations on women and anger or on body acceptance, we want to hear them.
Yes. Because those are two topics I definitely want to read more about.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking to me this week about the books I read.
Thank you for having another chat. I love it.
Oh, and I want to tell the listeners, it's going to come out on Friday, and I'm driving to Columbus on Friday. So I'm doing 2 classes in Columbus. If you're near Columbus, come see me Saturday, Sunday. My Facebook page is where you can see the details and like message me that you're around, and we'll meet up.
Awesome.
Yay, thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you guys next week.
Bye.